2008, also read Goodwin's book. They both understood the historical parallel when President Obama asked her to serve as Secretary of State. Abraham Lincoln had offered that post to his main competitor, William Seward. Seward said yes, and so did Hillary Clinton. Over her 3 decades of historical writing, Goodwin wrote in her introduction, she had come to know the lives of Franklin Roosevelt, the Kennedys, and Lyndon Johnson. In her 20s, she had actually worked for LBJ. After spending a decade living and breathing Abraham Lincoln, she saw that he surpassed all the others in his power to captivate the imagination and to inspire emotion. He had drawn her in with his humor, intelligence, fortitude, and self-deprecating composure. Goodwin's contagious enthusiasm for Lincoln rubbed off on Steven Spielberg. In 1999, after running into Goodwin at a conference on the impending millennium, he asked her what she was writing about. He knew she'd won the Pulitzer Prize in 1995 for No Ordinary Time, a study of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt during World War II. When she uttered the name Lincoln, he salivated. He hadn't been looking to make a film on Lincoln, but he'd been fascinated by the 16th president since boyhood. Would she consider selling him the movie rights, he asked, even though her book was years away from publication? She was thrilled by the offer, and they shook on it. A few years later, their partnership doubled into a star-studded 4-member team of literary and cinematic artists. Screenwriter Tony Kushner came aboard through the combined persuasion of Spielberg and Goodwin, and actor Daniel Day-Lewis finally signed on after reading a draft of Kushner's script. In 2012, most critics and ticket buyers found their depiction of the president riveting. Without Goodwin, the historian, the creator and team of rivals of a gripping story and a carefully chiseled verbal monument to her hero, the movie never would have happened. Lincoln built upon earlier films. Tony Kushner has expressed special fondness for John Ford's Young Mr. Lincoln. But Lincoln is the first one to deliver a fully embodied presidential Lincoln. Politician, chief magistrate, commander-in-chief, father, and husband, whose physical frame carried the load of war and stood in life and death as symbol of the undivided republic. Spielberg registered the pace and power of that frame in his first brainstorm about what the camera should record. A solitary Lincoln, ambling down a White House hallway, silently pondering the nation's fate. Long before the assassination, and even before his presidency, many Americans had taken Lincoln's towering, shambling physique as a symbol of Republican simplicity and American self-making. Thanks to photography and other visual arts, his body exerted huge symbolic force during the Civil War. But with his sudden metamorphosis into the nation's martyr-in-chief in the spring of 1865, his capacity to evoke love and gratitude expanded exponentially. The mythic potency already contained in his living frame was magnified beyond measure in his bruised and rigid corpse. In the hearts and minds of African Americans and Northern whites, Lincoln's body was no longer just a symbol. It was an actual physical bestowal, one that metamorphosed, in the decades to come, into a virtual embodiment of national purpose and glory. Still a symbol, but for many people more charged and real than other icons. Uncle Sam was a symbol standing for the nation. Lincoln was a man dying for the nation. Ever since May 4th, 1865, Americans have vied with one another to exploit Lincoln's symbolic power. For a century after his death, African Americans did the most to preserve a continuous memory of Lincoln the Emancipator, and they did so by treasuring what they took as the providential meaning of his martyrdom. He had given his life for the nation, but he had also given it especially for them. Nowadays, after the re-election of the first African-American president, differences in the way blacks and whites see Lincoln have been mostly overcome. The image of Lincoln's body and face, familiar to all, doesn't carry the same nearly sacred